Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox, giving you the edge you need to get into the colleges of your dreams, with your host, Steve Schwartz. That's me. Today, we're talking with Kristin Keating. Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox, Kristin. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for being on the show. Excited to feature you. Now, you've got a really diverse background. You've worked on the SAT, the ACT, and college admissions consulting. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, well, it's kind of an interesting story about how I got started in all of that. I was on a completely different track. I was in graduate school, and I began working in test prep as a part-time job to do something that I love doing, which is teaching. And honestly, at the time, I felt very naive. I was shocked to see how big of an industry test prep was. When I was in high school, I didn't do much more than wake up on a Saturday morning and just go and take the SAT. And then to subsequently also learn how enormously helpful and important test prep can be. And since then, I did not abandon my PhD. I finished, but I didn't continue on the original track. I stuck with the working in test prep and college and grad admissions counseling, which I've been doing for about 10 years now. And it's my absolute favorite thing in the world to open up my students' eyes to see how they as well can conquer these tests with a little bit of insider knowledge and also a bit of hard work, of course.
Oh, wow, that's really something, Kristin. Now, you have this PhD. Was there a pivotal moment that led you away from academia and towards test prep? A particular moment that came to mind, that comes to mind in terms of you're making that decision, that switch?
Right. Well, it's just really the experience of working really closely. I really love high school students. I really love working with high school students. I think it's a really cool time in their lives. And I really enjoyed it so much while I was in school and doing studies. And academia, you get to teach, of course, but a lot of times there's a lot of other duties that you have to be attending to. You have to be publishing. You have to be networking. And I just really wanted to teach. And I love standardized tests. I'm a super geek about them. I love figuring them out. I think they're really interesting puzzles. And so that working in test prep allows me to do what I love, be working really closely with students and figuring out how they learn best, and also being challenged every day myself because standardized tests are just, crazy, interesting puzzles to be figuring out.
Have you ever had a student where, obviously students who are have that stress and that anxiety because the stakes are super high for them. Have you ever had a student who started off seeing it in kind of like a stressful sense and kind of having that same transition you've had towards a puzzle, seeing it more as more of like a fun puzzle? What's that step-by-step process like?
Yeah, I mean, as a tutor, that happened for me all the time, where I'd have students come in and they are just either reluctant, they've been forced into this test prep, it's something that they just have to do, or they're completely stressed out about it because they've been thinking about it since they were 5 years old and they're into the spectrum, and it's been this big looming obstacle for them. And I think you can show students really quickly that there are strategies, there are tricks to this test, or to the ACT, to the SAT, to your subject test, your AP test, that you can learn really quickly to help you make rapid gains. And so once you stop thinking of it as a test that measures your intelligence or tells people how smart you are, and start thinking of it as a skill that you can take steps towards, just like being on the soccer field or being in band and learning an instrument, then I think you can gain a whole different perspective on it.
No, that's so true. And it's not something that necessarily happens overnight. It's more, do you find that it's more of a gradual process, or is there some sort of light bulb moment that a student will experience that kind of makes it all click?
Well, I think it completely depends on the student, of course. It's not going to be something that's overnight. So that's something I've always told my students about. Standardized tests are something that are really easy to procrastinate on because you sign up for a test and it's months away and there's no intermittent deadlines, there's no teachers checking in with you to do homework and take these baby steps. And that's why doing test prep, I think, is so important, whether it's a study schedule that you're setting for yourself, whether it's working with a tutor, whether it's taking a class, whether it's using online resources to build out the study plan, is so important because you do need to take those baby steps and you do need to practice. It's not something you can cram for the night before. That being said, I mean, I certainly have had lots of students have kind of light bulb moments along the way. And that's really fun process for me to see somebody who had no idea what the essay graders were looking for in the essay, for example, and then just learning a structure to write in, and they say, okay, well, I can do that. And they do that, and they'll see instant improvements in their score, or learn how to use the answer choices and work backwards on the math test. And they've just been using their process that they learned in school to go through and do all these calculations. And then once they realize that, oh my gosh, all they had to do was look at the answer choices and plug them into a question, and they're fine. Those are kind of like the light bulb moments that happen all the time along the way on the test prep route. But you won't have those light bulb moments the night before the test, because all you're thinking about is just trying to do some practice questions or turn out a practice test and exhausting yourself. So
yeah,
you
of course.
Have that schedule set.
Yeah. The night before, it's already too late. You don't want to cram this stuff last minute. Planning ahead is definitely super important. Is there a particular moment in time that you can take us to with a particular student who had one of those light bulb moments of insight?
Yeah, what comes to mind is the student that I just briefly alluded to there. He was an incredible writer. And when he went to take the official ACT, when he got to that essay portion, he saw the topic and said, I can write about that, and went completely off track of it. He kind of talked about it, but he didn't really talk about it in the way that this test was expecting. And he ended up getting a really low score. I think it was something like 4 or 5 out of 12. And he was shocked, and I was shocked. And I asked him, what happened? There's no way, you're such a good writer. But according to the essay graders, he didn't answer the question. And this is a really important lesson when you're dealing with standardized tests, aka tests that need to be standardly graded for millions of test takers. You need to do some playing by the rules. You need to not only understand what the graders expect on the essay, but also need to get inside the heads of the test makers on different sections of the test, understanding how they create questions and answer choices and what kind of correct and incorrect answers there are. The more you understand that, the better you'll do. So this was you probably don't want to be learning those lessons on the official exam like this student, who then had to go and retake it to get the score that he wanted. You want to be learning that in advance. But yeah, that's a light bulb moment that stands out for me.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't matter how well you write if you're not answering the question, is kind of what I gathered from this.
Right.
Really, really valuable lesson there, Kristin. Thanks so much for sharing that one. So that's a student who ended up, not doing so well on the essay portion in that round. What about a student you've kind of walked through a transition from, a super low score to a super high score maybe? Or is there a success story that comes to mind where you can really point to some sort of pivotal moment that they've experienced on that journey?
Yeah. Well, this is certainly not true for all students, but I've worked with quite a few students that have a lot of test anxiety issues, and that really hinders them. They're doing really well in school. They're getting straight A's because they pay attention and they do their work, and then they get to this daunting task of the standardized test, and they're completely paralyzed by anxiety anytime they sit down to do even a timed practice test, much less the real administration. I'm actually going to give you a little case study of myself. When I first started tutoring for the SAT and the ACT, I went to go take the SAT on a Saturday morning alongside a bunch of other high school students. And it had been a really long time since I had taken a standardized test under real conditions. And as much as I had told my students about how to relieve stress and the impact of nerves on brain function and test performance, when I picked up my pencil to write the essay at the beginning of the SAT, my hand was shaking so bad I couldn't even write a word. And I had to put my pencil down and take some deep breaths and remind myself that I was an adult, that this test had little impact on my future. And then I'm looking around at these high school students who this test has a real impact on their future at that point in their lives, and how much more stressed out they could potentially be than me. And this was a really eye-opening experience for myself. And of course, dealing with test anxiety and stress, there's a lot of ways to deal with it, and it's a long process. But it really helped me realize how important it is to practice taking tests under time conditions and kind of making those baby steps, kind of like getting over a phobia, right? So first you need to sit down and, take a test with the timer ticking next to you. And then with your mom, doing the time for you, and then maybe go to the library, you sit with a bunch of other students around you, and you take a timed practice test if that's really your issue, and then you go and sit for a practice test that's being given at your school, and then you do the real thing, and you make sure you have other tests lined up in the future as in case things don't go as well this time. So taking tests under real circumstances as possible, so that you can not only be dealing with the actual content of the test, which sometimes can be really easy when you're not feeling stressed and you can just take your time on it, dealing with the pressure of the test, but also dealing with the kid, blowing his nose next to you the entire time, or the room that doesn't have a clock or is too cold. All those stuff have such a big impact on how you can perform on a test, and it's so important to practice that stuff.
Lots of powerful nuggets there, Kristin. Thanks so much for sharing those. It's really important, yes, simulating actual test day conditions so that when you take it for real, it's just another practice test in a lot of ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are some things that you've seen students do to best simulate that experience?
Well, there are test centers or test prep companies that will have practice tests that are free and available to the public. They might give you a little bit of a pitch for their services,
sure.
But you can do those. And so I've often encouraged students to be on the lookout for those opportunities if they're not already set up with a test prep company that will do that for you. Oftentimes schools will have those, and so students should be making sure that those are on their calendar too, talking to their counselor about any practice tests that they may be offering. At the very least, I've had students just make sure they go and take it at a library, someplace that's quiet, but also has that feeling of there's people around you doing other things, there's distractions, and sit down with an official practice test, either from the College Board Guide or from the official guide to the ACT. Make sure you're doing an official test when you're really trying to simulate the test experience and do it that way.
Definitely. Those are really great tips. I'm wondering, you work with a lot of students. What are some of the horror stories that you've heard about actual test day experiences, just so that our listeners can get an idea of what the worst case scenario could be for them on test day? Yeah.
Well, I've gone to quite a few administrations of the SAT and the ACT myself as a tutor, so I've been able to, or working with Magoosh, so I've been able to go and observe what's happening to other students around me. So I've been able to observe some of this myself. And of course, I get the horror stories from students as well, too. The most recent administration of the ACT I went to, I saw a girl who got turned away at the door because she didn't have her ID. She just had it on her phone. And because she didn't have that hard plastic copy, she had to turn around and drive an hour home and couldn't test that day because there's no way she could make it back in time, and had to completely reschedule her test. During the actual test, there's been fire alarms that have gone off. There's been proctors who don't keep track of time, and that's why you can't control everything that goes on in your test day. But I always try to make sure that our students control as much as possible, and that means being prepared for all the contingencies you can, bringing extra batteries, bringing extra pencils, bringing your own watch, and knowing the timing of the test in case your proctor is not on top of things, and also advocating for yourself. I think a lot of students, they get into the situation, it's a proctor that they don't know, they feel like they're just supposed to listen to whatever they say, and they sit there and be quiet and just deal with everything. And then they come out of the test center and they go to their parents or they go to me and say, everything went wrong, and the windows were open, it was too loud. And it's like, well, what? Did you ask if they could close the window? No, I didn't know if I could raise my hand. So don't forget to advocate for yourself. If something is in the testing center that is inhibiting your testing experience, don't be afraid to raise your hand, even if it's during a test section, so the proctor can come over, or between sections of the test to ask if something can be changed. It may not, and in that case, you need to be flexible, you need to deal with it, but those are my two big points. Control as much as you possibly can, and also don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. This is your big test day, and you've prepared for it. So if there's something that you can do to make for a better testing situation, make sure you do it, and don't just complain about it after.
Yeah, totally, Kristin. I couldn't agree more. Definitely control what you can, which comes down partially, at least, to reading the instructions beforehand and knowing that you need to bring your actual physical plastic ID. A photo of it on your cell phone is not going to cut it. And definitely advocating for yourself also super important. If the window is open and it's too cold or too hot, or it's noisy outside right out the window, maybe it's a sports team playing on the field outside, or the jazz band is practicing or something, it's okay to raise your hand and be like, hey, can we close the window? And I think everyone in the room will thank you later for having the courage to ask that, and they're not going to kick you out of the room for a perfectly reasonable question.
Right.
No, totally true. Thanks for bringing those points up, Kristin. I want to shift gears now, moving to the lightning round, where I'm going to ask you some rapid-fire questions. You give me some rapid-fire responses. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Great. What's your number one piece of advice for the college admissions process?
Well, for test prep, I would say take as many official tests as you can. So both the College Board and the ACT publish books of exams, and they have 1 or 2 free for each test online. But they're not going to give you great strategy advice, though, so you need to supplement them with some high-quality test prep resources. But there is absolutely nothing like that out there to simulate what the official test is going to be like other than the official tests that have actually been released.
So true. Nothing like the official exams themselves. Could you share with us one habit that you believe contributes to admissions success?
Yes. Well, for test prep again, too, I would say make sure you're thinking of things long term as well, and use a study plan and commit to regular study a few times a week when you're prepping for the test. But that also applies to college admissions as well, too. You should be thinking about college admissions as early as you possibly can in your high school career so that you can be mapping out your activities, your coursework, setting goals so that you can be achieving them, so that when you come to the time to sit down and fill out your college application, you have tons of stuff to fill out, and it's not the first time that you've thought about presenting yourself to a college as a college applicant is right before you go to apply.
So true. Planning ahead is really important. Don't want to cram it last minute. Could you share with us one online resource that you absolutely love?
Yeah, well, in addition to Magoosh, because I think we make test prep as awesomely fun as possible, I really like College Navigator from the National Center for Education Statistics. It's a site where you can search for schools for you based on a whole bunch of criteria, and it gives you a whole bunch of information on the college in one place, from tuition to demographics to admissions statistics on test scores and what the college recommends or requires in their admissions process. So it's a great site to research and compare schools, whether you are a student, a parent, or even a counselor.
Great. Yeah, we'll link to that one in the show notes. I love it too. What's one book that you believe no college applicant should be without?
Okay, well, I like the Biscuit Guide to College for Students, looking at exploring schools. You have to take it with a grain of salt because you're thinking about one person's opinion or just a small group of people's opinions here, but it's a really great resource for finding more schools that are like the schools that you're looking at, or for finding schools that are strong in the arts or the engineering or whatever you're looking for, to really open your eyes to some other possibilities of schools that maybe you hadn't thought of or haven't even heard of that fulfill criteria that you're looking for.
Totally. It's a super valuable resource. What are you up to these days, Kristin? What are you working on? What are you looking forward to?
Well, right now I am deep in the middle of helping to develop our ACT prep product for Magoosh. So we've already released our English and our science sections, and our reading and math are coming very, very, very soon. We have practice questions. Each of those practice questions come with a video explanation and a text explanation. We also have lesson videos covering all the content and the strategy for the test. And plus, you are able to email our tutors anytime with any questions that you have. So our goal at Magoosh here is to make test prep accessible and fun and affordable. We already have products for the SAT, the TOEFL, and graduate tests, and we're really excited about our new ACT product, which you can check out at Magoosh, our website.
Well, that's awesome. We'll link to that as well. I'm sure students will be happy to know they can email you guys at 4 a.m. with questions while they're studying in the middle of the night. That's great.
It's true. We have tutors all over the world answering questions all the time.
Oh, that's awesome. Where can folks find you online?
Our main website is www.magoosh.com. I'll spell it. I know it's kind of a funny word. It's Magoosh. So it's a play on a Persian word for wise person.
Wise person, which is what you are and what I'm sure our listeners hope to become in test prep and college admissions. Thanks so much for joining us, Kristin. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. This was great.
I wanted to give you guys a few quick tips on starting your college essay, because I've been getting some questions about getting over writer's block and finally choosing a topic. Writing college essays is really, really hard. I spent months thinking about college essays, but felt like I was getting nowhere when it came to actually getting started. I mean, it's not easy to start writing a college essay that's supposed to show admission officers who you really are. One of the most effective ways I found to help students finally start their essays is by telling them not to start at the beginning. Instead, I recommend using a strategy called free writing. It's pretty simple, kind of stream of consciousness. You just write down any random ideas as they come to you. Then you figure out how to connect them and edit them later. So if you think of something, anything at all, that you think might work well for your essay, just write it down. Don't think about whether it's good or bad, or whether it'll work or not. Just get it all down on paper or on the computer. I've seen so many students write the best sentences of their essays only after they do a lot of free writing. And when you write, you can use any style that works for you. Bullet points, an outline, or even just a word or two. Another strategy that really works is to use writing prompts. They're really a great tool to help you get started and make it a lot easier. I don't know if you've ever done Mad Libs, maybe as a kid, but it's kind of similar to those. For those of you who've never used writing prompts before, I'll just give you a couple of quick examples. They could be sentences as simple as, I enjoy learning about X because Y. Here's another one. A global issue that excites me is X because Y. I know these might sound kind of lame, but really, don't knock it till you've tried it. Doing a bunch of these can really help get your creative juices flowing. So I've put together a ton of writing prompts and also some lists of questions to get those juices flowing so you can finally get started with your college essay. These tools can really help you if you're having trouble getting motivated or if you're unsure about what to write about. These are just some of the resources I've put together in a premium course to help you write effective college essays. You can get access to all of these resources and sign up for the college essay course at collegeadmissionstoolbox.com/essays. Thanks for listening to College Admissions Toolbox. Head over to www.collegeadmissionstoolbox.com to get more free tools and resources that will help you get into the colleges of your dreams.